Hello, everyone. Welcome to RHAP, where we know reality TV, and it is time to talk about Season 11, Episode 4 of The Amazing Race Canada. I am your host, Jess Liese. I am one of your two co-hosts, and of course, with me as always, to talk about everything that happened in this trip to the Northwest Territories is a guy that knows the difference between an Arctic fox and an Arctic wolf, Mr. Dan Heaton. Hello, Dan.
Yes, I do. There's a links too. A links is in there. That's important. But yeah, I'm excited to be here, Jess. We got Team Steel and Cavs. We've got, lots of drama. Teams you taking a penalty. I don't know. I mean, I think we started to get into a bit of a more tiring leg, which led to some fun. I mean, and as we predicted, a non-elimination, but I still enjoyed it.
Yeah, get a little bit of killer fatigue up in there. We get arguably a dumb move that's the dumbest move ever. We got a lot of superlatives we're going to talk about this week, and I'm excited for that. We have a first visit to the Northwest Territories, I believe, and we get to see some snow, which we're in the middle of a heat dome across most of North America at the moment, so the snow was very refreshing. But I guess we will start out. We'll start out with the curious note from Blake, who believes that penguins are in the Arctic. And I wonder if he was disappointed not to see any penguins.
Oh, those guys, our number one team of the week, still figuring it all out in terms of the wildlife. I thought the Arctic was really cool though, Jess. I thought
Amazing.
I mean, jumping to the pit stop, it looks spectacular, but everything, it's really easy, like no matter what you're doing in a task to be like, oh boy, look at that backdrop or whatever. But they made them do a lot of things, a lot of different things. And, that's really descriptive there for a show. Just a lot of things,
Oh yeah,
Jess. They did.
It's one of the things I love about the show is that there's a lot of things. It's one of the
things. Yeah, but early on, we should talk about the intrigue that showed up briefly at the beginning, which was teams talking about, but possibly knowing what happened with the Express Pass. And I wanted to bring this up, of course, because we saw EB and Blake talking to Ika and Dimitri, where it was like mind was blown because they're like, I think that they gave it to Jesse and Jonathan. And, and Ika was like, basically, that's the dumbest move in Amazing Race Canada history. Did specify it's always Amazing Race Canada. This is the Amazing Race Canada, of course. And Ika said it was the dumbest move. And I don't know about that, but I think it was, there's been a few, Jess, don't you think?
I don't think it qualifies as the dumbest move if you're still in the race and you're not about to lose the race. So I think for that alone, I think a dumb move is one that gets you kicked out of the race. And I think we could go through, we were talking before we started recording about some of the dumber moves. I think we got to go all the way back to season 1. The bar was set pretty high, pretty early on for dumb moves when you had a team who could see both halves of the detour and they were in danger of being in last place and held on to their Express Pass anyway until they got eliminated with the Express Pass in their pocket. I think that is probably up there as far as dumb Amazing Race Canada moves.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's tricky because sometimes it's like, oh, a team took a penalty or whatever, but sometimes, like we saw this week, we'll get to it, teams are just so exhausted that I would not say, I've had it when I don't eat for 3 hours and I'm like, I don't know what to do and stuff. And these are people running a race in front of cameras and stuff. But yeah, to me, just looking at the Express Pass, beyond that one, you have teams trying to win first place and just wasting it. The thing about it is Louis and Marie and the Short Kings both use the Express Pass. We rarely see it used so effectively. But the giving away, I don't know, the giving away thing I think is really good for the TV show. But I always find it a little boring. So I'm just like, it's all right, Jess. But it's not, to me, it's better for the TV show than having a big impact on the race, I think.
Yeah, honestly, I am not mad at any giving away of an express pass that is done without any ceremony or fanfare. So we didn't have anybody like clamoring to receive the express pass. We didn't have Louis and Marie trying to coerce the best deal out of anybody. They just gave it to a team they liked that they knew would help them out better, and it has turned out that that team has helped them. So this is not a dumb move.
Yeah, and I don't mean to pick on Ike at all. I just it was more I just thought it was interesting to talk about. I mean, because they I also think them coming from Big Brother, they're definitely approaching everything more strategically. So for them, they're like, well, that strategy's not good. But I think, Amazing Race, not I mean, there is strategy, but it's a bit different, I think.
It is. Yeah, and I think you don't bring the Big Brother team onto Amazing Race so that they don't talk about strategy. It's kind of expected at this point. And they're not wrong. It's not. I wouldn't say I would have done the same thing necessarily, but I don't think it's catastrophic. It's not catastrophically bad for sure. I was very excited to see. I got these great flashbacks to like the one word of Gwitchin that I actually know because I have a small child and we spent a lot of time watching Molly of Denali on PBS. And
Yes.
they Molly of Denali is a young woman who's a young First Nations child who lives in Alaska, and she says Masi Cho about 500 times every episode. More times than we saw it in this episode, in fact. So every time I hear Masi Cho, I'm like, oh, I remember Molly of Denali. It was such a great show. And I kind of miss those days. My kid watches better stuff now most of the time, but that one's a banger, and I do miss it.
Oh yeah, I remember that. My kids used to watch so many, not to go off on that tangent, but PBS kids shows. And it's good. It has a connection now to something that might have helped on the race. But that was a fun part of the detour. I guess we should mention the Muskrat Jamboree here, which I know was the first thing. But I mean, mostly this didn't seem like with one exception, like a gross out eating. It was just, to me, kind of interesting because it's like, okay, it's something they have there. It might be tough for some, especially, of course, with Lacey being a vegan. But that actually made the task a little more interesting, I thought.
You knew somebody was going to be at this one.
Of course.
And this one, you have to have these tasks where you try some usual food. But I think, like, as far as this kind of task goes, I liked this a lot better than some of the previous ones because this one, the food actually looked really good, and I would have been excited to try it. And B, I think it felt like you were also getting the experience of like getting to hang out with the locals in a place where the locals hung out. And it's such a small town thing to have this community hall with the plastic tablecloths and the padding. That is such a small town thing. And you could tell it's something like this is the kind of party they would normally have. They weren't just setting something up for the purposes of the Amazing Race. They definitely did set this up for the purposes of the Amazing Race, but they'd be here anyway, is the thing I got from it. I will say John didn't try any of the food, which is something that I feel like, is it just me or is John doing a lot less of the hands-on demonstrating the tasks than he used to? It was not that long ago we had him like eating a bull testicle and calling it nutty. So I don't know what was up with this. Like, I hope John's not backing away from diving into every Amazing Race task with gusto, because I miss it. I would miss it a lot. But he held it up and he pretended he was going to eat it, but he didn't actually eat it. And I'm noticing, John. I see.
Yeah. So John, we'll get to John later a little bit more. He had
we got a lot about John this week. He had a week.
But I will say, yeah, it is interesting because, like you said, we've talked about him a lot, but he seemed to he's introducing everything. But like, even you can't count the singing last week. That was entertaining. I appreciated it, but it's not like he put on the wig and went up into the window and did the whole thing. So yeah, I think maybe he's still trying things out, as we saw at the bat. He's trying stuff out. So I guess, or who knows, maybe he's just really doesn't, it's not his jam, I mean, for me, yeah, I looked at this. Usually when they come up, I'm like, that looks terrible. And I've also been like, the challenges that way, where those are just like, let's see how much close-up throwing up we can see. There was none of that this time. I mean, even, that was nice. We don't need people throwing up at people's local establishments, But to what you mentioned, though, Joe and Grace got there later. They were last because they had the cab issues. But the people were like, "Oh, you're eating so politely," because they were the last one. I'm sure there were people like Louie who were just like, "Give me all the food," like he's a force of nature. Even eating some of Lacey's food kindly because she had to eat both. But I don't know. I agree with you. I think there was a nice vibe to this, and it didn't have that whole like, oh my gosh, this looks like really painful. It was like, okay, not everybody's loving this. Some people seem to really like it. People like Rebecca's were like, this is great food, but others not so much. But it wasn't like, and it also didn't demean the culture, because that's always a challenge when you have people eating like something that's important to the culture. I think we've talked about this in past years, and then people throwing up. It's a little weird. So this was a good balance.
Yeah, it seemed like they handled it. There was no sense of like, oh, can you believe people eat this? It's so gross. And people were excited. I think Louis was the MVP here. He didn't just steal some of the food off Celia's plate, like take a big bite and put it back, but he also was stealing food off of his mom's plate, which I thought that was wonderful. Louis would have eaten everybody's food off of everybody's plate if you gave him half the chance. He was hungry. Bag on Amazing Race Canada a lot for having these hyper local tasks and call it kind of the amazing chamber of commerce. But I think in this case, it really worked. You had this sense of like everybody was celebrating with you. I thought it was curious. I think they must have put in this rule that it didn't matter how much food everybody ate as long as both were clean. They had to put that in case you were a vegetarian or in case they don't want to force somebody to throw up. So what I was surprised about was it just said both plates have to be clean. So theoretically, they could have just let Louis eat the entire plate. And I was waiting for them to get dinged with a penalty, and they were going to get dinged with a penalty anyway. But if one had put a second penalty on either one of them for like, yeah, you didn't eat all of your team's food, another team had to eat your food for you. I was waiting for that to happen, and I'm glad it didn't happen, because I think, Canada in general is more tolerant of teams helping other teams, and I thought it was just a cute moment.
Yeah, and I think my guess is Louis probably turned to a producer or something and was like, hey, can I eat that? And they was like, their probably thought was good TV. Like, yes, eat it. It's like the Jeff Probst thing. This is good TV. I can change the rules however I want. But maybe there probably were clear rules in the extra paper that said you could. But I like that because, they don't seem to try it. I mean, they don't seem to have very murky rules. You don't see a case where John is I don't go into all that again, but we had the weird Amazing Race US thing where the rules didn't seem to make a lot of sense and the team got eliminated. We haven't really seen that in Canada where that happens. So this case, I thought it was fine. It's the first task of the leg. It didn't really have a big impact that much, and they were almost done. Yeah, if he had just sat down when they started just eating all their food, I would have been like, that's a little weird. But this was at the end. It was really just a sweet moment between teams, which I like. I like that they're competing, but the teams still, even when they're U-turning each other, whatever, these teams still get along pretty well.
It has great British Bake Off vibes. Like, when the teams are, when the bakers are making their food and one of them finishes before the end of the time limit and they go over and like they help frost the other person's cake. That's the vibe it's giving, and it's wholesome fun. And Louis, I think, is picking up to be like, he's so wholesome. He's such a good guy. And he's also like, different. This is a very different mother-son team. Like, I think I've not seen a mother-son team like this before. And I'm not sure exactly what it is about them, but usually you have like the bond feels like, Louis doesn't feel like the classic mama's boy that we've seen in other mother-son teams. We've never seen a team that like they're as strong, I think, as I'm trying to think of like Jin is kind of the highest performing mother-son team we've ever had in a North American Amazing Race. And they give kind of that vibe, except there's not any vulnerability to them. Like even when Maria is having trouble with her knees and she has to physically slow down, like she's in it. And they finished in the middle of the pack this week, and I think they would have done even better. But I'm just so interested. Like, they're just so intriguing to me. Like, they're in good shape. They're smart racers. They know what they're doing, and they get along really well with each other and with the other racers. So I'm very, very curious to see like how this shakes out for them, because usually the parent-child teams are out very, very early, and this one I think could go much further.
Yeah, I noticed it more this week just because I think the big difference is he's older. I mean, not older but a lot of these, like you've said, or I think of like the Margie and Luke or something, or you have some where the son is like 20 or 22 and is usually like big fan of the race, or not that Louis not. That's not really what I mean. But for Louis, he's a dad who's in like his mid to late 30s or something.
He's much younger than that.
Is he really?
I was thinking he was.
Yeah. I was thinking he's like 35, but maybe I'm overshooting.
No, I think he's 26. I looked this up because I was surprised at how
32. Yeah, 32. So we split the difference.
He's 32. Okay, all right. But
he's still older than like your typical 22, 23. And I think that does make a difference. I was thinking he was a bit older because I know. Difference. Yeah. So they're similar, gap. I mean, a little bit, where sometimes it's like the mom is 48, the kid's 23 or whatever. So this is similar. Yeah. She's older, but she's also in amazing shape. But I think it makes a big difference because it's almost like it's not like it's almost not their equals. Obviously, it's his mom, and it's his mom. She's his mom, but basically they race differently than where someone's so like, Mom, what do we do? What do we do? He's like, here's what we're doing. I'm taking both bags and we're going. It's just very different.
Maybe that's it. Maybe it's because son is kind of the alpha here. And even when the son is the one who's like most wants to be there and is most kind of physically pushing the mom, you don't have him like running the show. You used to have mom as kind of doing the directing and the strategizing, and maybe that's what it is. It's that he brings maturity to this dynamic that we've not seen in other mother-son teams.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And just, I mean, he just totally wiped out at one point, which just jumped back up. And then they're doing the games later, and he's sliding across the floor, and I'm like, what is happening here? But it's a good character, but I don't mean character in a bad way. What I mean is, seems like a real nice, good guy, nice person, but also is kind of a character, Yeah.
Yeah, I think I don't know what I expected out of the team, but they've exceeded my expectations for sure. All right, well, I think we got to go next to the cab of it all. Oh, first of all, these teams are coming in on two different planes to this town of 3,000 people, and there are somehow 8 taxi cabs in a town of less than, a town of, low 4 digits. Somehow support 8 taxi cabs, which seemed a little weird to me. But you have the second plane arriving, and I don't think it was that far behind the first plane, but you get Grace and Joe and Evie and Blake are both going for the cabs, and they both did call a cab. I think this is something I want to unpack a little bit. They both call the cab, but whatever cab shows up first, they don't know whose name is going to be on it. And so Evie and Blake run out, and Blake says that this is the cab for Blake and Joe. and like, yep, guess there's two Joes. Yeah, look at me, I'm Joe now. This is our cab. And it's a throwback to the very, very early Amazing Race seasons where people were doing this constantly. Like, people would call the cab company and cancel each other's cabs to the airport, and they jump in. There was I think in 23, there was a cab driver taking bags out of a cab to take another team. These kind of hijinks, it's been at least a decade since this has been in the discourse. But this was such a single-digit Amazing Race season move.
Yeah, and in a one sense, I feel like this is one of those where it's like it was funny. I didn't find it like, even I remember when Eric and Jeremy canceled. I forget which team they canceled their cab. It was in season 9, and I also found them real smarmy. And I was just like, those guys are the worst. I found that kind of annoying. This, I was like, well, it was funny because of the whole he used Joe. Like, he still used his brother's normal name. Like, or I forget who said it, but it's like,
well, I think he did that because the cab was called. Like, I think Blake gave his name to the cab company, and Joe gave his name to the cab company. So it's like they get in the cab. It doesn't matter. The cab driver doesn't say this is the cab for Joe. He says, like, who's the cab for? And he's, if he throws out both names, it's 100% chance that it's his cab.
Yeah, and it made a big difference because Grace and Joe, I mean, they ended up recovering partially due to just, a variety of factors, the leg design, and then also a penalty. But it put them, I don't know how far ahead, but at least in this type of leg, I mean, you saw it where the eating didn't take long because the flights, they said, were 15 minutes apart. And basically, pretty much all the teams from the first flight were gone by the time the second flight showed up. And by the time Grace and Joe showed up to eat, they were the only ones there. So that test didn't take long. So it seemed worse and they even said it took them an hour total that they spent at the airport, which in a leg that might be 3-4 hours, I don't know. An hour is a big deal. It might be longer because of that last flight, but up to that last flight. So it made a big difference. But I don't know. Evie and Blake, I got to say, Jess, I am so happy that they won the leg. And not because, I mean, for them, sure, they seem like nice guys. So we don't have to hear about it for the next 7 weeks. I'm so happy, Jess, they won the leg. It's so good.
Yeah, I just didn't want to. And, as much as I love Jesse and Jonathan, as much as I respect the thing that they are doing because they are tremendously good racers, I don't like the seasons where one team wins all the legs. Ricky and Cesar are wonderful people. I love them as humans. I loved watching them on their season, but they won every week and it got boring. And I want to see some competition. I want to see it mixed up. I think seeing another team win this week, it could have been any of these teams. I love all of these teams. It could have been any of them. I just want to see somebody else win at some point. So that I was happy with. And also, I feel like they're coming to it, they're bringing a little bit of fun villainy to it that we have not seen in a while, but it doesn't feel mean-spirited. Like, everybody is still congratulating each other and they're excited to be there. And it's like, this is all within the bounds of what we're doing. You don't have, really, with one glaring exception, we've not had a team like that. Where all other teams are just like, these are terrible people and I don't want to be around them. And they're doing diabolical things at every turn, like just to twirl the mustache. I don't get that from Evie and Blake. I think they're competitors and they're going to use every advantage to give them. It's more of a Boston Rob than a Russell Hantz scenario. And even I think Boston Rob is pushing it, but it's got some meat block vibes.
Yeah, for sure. And I didn't mean to jump ahead. I thought of it in terms of we are talking about Ian
Yeah.
and Blake, because I do think it relates to it. I mean, it's not a reason they won, because they did do most of the tasks really well, because they also were near the back of the pack going into the detour. But should we go to the detour and talk about the school, or the stick and bone task? I mean, there are indigenous names which I really appreciate. I don't want to disrespect anyone by trying to say them incorrectly. So
Yeah. Well, I don't think John did a very good job when he was
no.
introducing them. But although he did, I think the one thing he did say during that intro that I think we got to put a pin on, and holy doodle. Is this a John thing? Has he said this before? He must have said
I
this
wrote
before.
it down. I don't think so. I wrote it down, but that's very John. If he's, we got to track this. If he says holy doodle again, then we're going to be like, come on. No, it needs to
Is he
feel
trying to
natural.
make it a thing? Is this a spin and grin situation?
Rip and read, spin and grin. No. We're good. We're good, John. But
Still
yeah,
trying to make fetch happen, John.
But I don't know. I like the detour. What did you think?
Yeah, it was fine. It was. I like that we're spending some time with the languages. I especially liked hearing the experiences of the First Nations teams that are in the race about the languages that they learned as children, and that they were calling on that experience, even though linguistically, I don't think either Rebecca or Magoo actually were able to use it to help them with the challenge. But I like that we're highlighting that there are so many more languages in Canada than just English and French, and that these languages are how kids get to learn them, because this is something that Canada has had a very problematic legacy with, and they're now giving a chance to put these things in the spotlight. I thought it was great. I thought this was a fun challenge that promoted interaction, and which is different from a lot of language challenges where it's like you're going to have flashcards, you're going to memorize words, you're going to say what the words are. Here you actually had to answer questions. You had to understand what was being said to you and then know what to say back. And I thought that was a nice spin on it, especially because you're talking to like one of the elders in the area. So all of this, the language task was great. Stick and bone, I don't know. This seemed like I wanted the toy to be more complicated.
Yeah, it was mostly just like, oh, you do this toy, but then they're like, we're delivering toys, and I was like, yeah, I don't know if that's really goes that far, but it was mainly your typical Amazing Race delivery task with also combined with like build something, but the building was pretty. Oh, and combining doing a little flippy.
Yeah, you had to do the thing.
But I think it was all designed. They were trying to figure out, like we talked about last week, how long is it likely going to take to do the language one? Okay, what do we need to add together on this one? How many places do they need to go? Is it 4? Is it 3? Okay, it's 5. But yeah, going back to what you said about the school, though, I also found I kind of wish they would have hit on a bit more. I feel like the Rebeccas have been a little under edited, but I found Rebecca's mentioning that her family members, she might have some tough feelings because her family members have been taken to a residential school there, which I know has come up in past seasons with Court. So it's come up before, but I'm not saying I wanted to get a really sad story, but and John kind of mentioned at the end what her feelings were, and she just said it was really positive. But I thought that was interesting. Then Magoo talking about going there and teaching kids. I also like that too. And, it's a quick stories, and also neither one foretold like a, anything elimination or anything. It was just good personal stories, especially with Rebecca. I was interested to learn a bit more there that we didn't get.
Yeah, and exciting that she's from there too. I think that's really cool, because I think we've now had somebody. Is she the first one from a territory? I think we've had every province except New Brunswick now that we've had Prince Edward Island this season, but I think she's the first one who's from actual territory, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and I thought, and she did mention too that her language history was in a completely different. The language didn't
Yeah.
connect at all, so they did
Yeah.
fine. And same with McHugh, they came out of it like 5 and 6. They weren't like near the front, and all the teams were really there. But I also like this was hard, but it was not impossible because again, we don't want it to have where people start going, "Oh, this language is the worst" or something. It's like you
Yeah.
have to find that balance, and this did. The team seemed to enjoy it. They got to sit in those tiny chairs, which I mean, that's brilliant. Brilliant to sit
Yeah.
in the tiny chairs
Yeah.
with the kids. So,
And I
so it
like
was
that they
fun.
got to practice with the kids. Got to
Yeah,
talk to the kids and interact with them. That was fun too. A lot of cute interactions with locals this week, as we're going to get to. And I think wherever they did slip up, wherever they did have a problem with the language, they always attributed it to themselves and not to the language being impossible, which I think is key. It's like, no, the language isn't hard. I'm just an idiot. So that's the energy I'd like to see brought to a challenge like this. Yeah, the tiny chairs. I think that was that. I think that's maybe the other differentiator. Like the interactive element I loved, and the tiny chairs are perfect.
and they're outside too. So I think there was just a lot to that I thought it was
Yeah.
different than if they were in a tiny room where there's no way to make that kind of look interesting. When they're outside, it's like, oh, they're just sitting outside. And I should mention 5 teams did that. We only had 3 to the toys, and I'm sure the show kind of was hoping it kind of be that way. But it seemed like they took about the same amount of time. There what didn't seem to be a big unbalanced nature in terms of that side
Yeah.
of it. At least.
This was not a snowshoe situation where you really don't want to take one of these. So yeah, and I don't think one seemed more fun than the other one either. Sometimes you get it where you've got like a boring looking task and a task that's like, we want to go bungee jumping, or we want to go like sort through this giant pile of things. I don't know what is a bore. Yeah, I want to go alphabetize this file cabinet or jump off a building. Which one are you going to choose? They're all going to choose jump off the building, because that's not only is that more fun TV, it's a more fun task. It seemed pretty well balanced in that regard as well. But then we get to go. I think this is probably the star challenge of the week. Anytime you go to the Arctic, I think it behooves you to do a little dog sledding. And I liked that it wasn't just, I think we've had dog sledding in the past on other iterations of the Amazing Race. It's been like, we're going to do the dog sledding for the sake of dog sledding. And you just have to like harness up and go from point A to point B and then get your clue. And it's just like a little stop on the road. But this actually had an element of actual, getting to figure out something along the way. And this is another thing. I think this is starting to become a trope too. Like, look at things while you're going on a course and then remember all the things on the course. We've had a lot of this on Amazing Race Canada. And this one, I think the real star of it was the dogs, but you had a strategy element, so they actually had to do something and be good at something, which is key. But I think really what you wanted to be in a situation is the person not doing the roadblock, so that you could sit there and pet the dogs while your partner did the task.
Yeah, she saw that with Celia, where she's like hugging the dogs, and then Lacey's like, "Oh my gosh, this is so bad." But yeah, I thought there were some interesting approaches to it too, where you had Jonathan's like LRCOWPH, but he like said it like in the sound. You had EB singing a song, and it's no coincidence those 2 teams were the fastest out, except for I think Joe did it in one shot, and it was Joe just kept repeating the words over and over, which also is a good way to do it. Rather than, because it's very easy when you're doing that to get distracted and be like, "Oh, these dogs are great. Oh, what was I looking at?" Which happened to a few people. But I think, just again, we've talked about this before. There always seems to be in these one that's going to be trickier. And there was a few. You had the Magoo where he just got them all wrong the first time, where he was really lost. But most people just missed. And they thought, because there was a board with more animals than 7, because they had to find 7. And the board must have had an Arctic fox on the board. And then there was the lynx. And I think they must have looked kind of alike. Yeah, so that threw a bunch of teams off. Where the first one they saw, they're like, Arctic fox, great. And also, even though the show made it seem like they got told when they got it wrong? I don't think so. I'm assuming, and I don't know for sure, that they read them all and the show didn't tell them which one was wrong. Because if they had told them up front when they missed Arctic Fox, they would have known. But Lacey kept saying Arctic Fox over and over, which makes me think they read them all and then they just said, sorry, you're wrong.
Yeah, some of the tasks you see people like they stop them as soon as they get one wrong. Like we saw in Amazing Race US this past season where they had the Chiefs. They got as far as like the one they got wrong and they would get stopped and they'd have to go back and do it again. And this one, I think you're right about that. But I also, Magoo didn't get them all wrong necessarily. He just left one out. And so then he got every subsequent wrong and one wrong in the wrong slot. So it wasn't as bad.
Sorry, Magoo. I apologize.
But I think he must be like this all the time, but it just jumped out at me this week. The way that he just like is 150 miles an hour at every single thing. Like he jumped into that language test and was like boom, 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 boom. And like every time they ask him a question, he's right on. And the same thing with this, he just like leaps off that dog sled, is like rattling off the names about twice as fast as anybody else. And it sometimes that works really well for him because they can breeze through a task pretty fast. But other times, he misses the details because he's going full tilt boogie at everything. And I loved the enthusiasm. I would not expect any less from a guy who's like a professional Edmonton Oilers fan. And apparently also goes to schools and gets kids to jump around and cheer. But I thought it was really like his energy was on a completely different plane from everybody else this week.
Yeah, I noticed that too. And the way that he's had the arm up and he's like, da-da, da-da, da-da. But also, yeah, like you said, the fencing first leg or whatever, where he's just like going at it like, okay, But I think the only trick is also too, they both do this where they're like, once he's like in that zone, she's like, hey, why don't you slow down? He's like, oh no, I'm doing it. It's not that they don't communicate well. It's just when you get into that zone, it's like sometimes they're both going like full on and it's tricky to kind of reel them back in. So we'll see. We'll have to track that if in the future that impacts them at all. But like I said, they were middle of the pack again. They were in no danger of being eliminated. They've already exceeded, and I hate to say it because I don't want to sound like I thought they were going to be terrible, but they've already exceeded my expectations just by, and I love too how we saw this with William Murray too. These teams in the middle that thought they might get eliminated that are around or that are so pumped to be like fourth and fifth place. It's just, I really like that. I want the teams to be just thrilled to be in that zone, and it's only going to help them in the future.
Yeah, we have so many teams now. Usually we talk a lot about, we have teams that it feels like any of them could win a leg. And this season, I think it's more like it feels like every single one of these teams could be in danger of getting eliminated and could live to fight another day. And for that reason, you'd be rooting for them. And we've had so many teams that have almost gotten eliminated. And I think it's more than half of them at this point that have come so close and like had some mistake that would have ended anybody else's race, but somehow they're still here. This is like the season of dumb luck. Mm-hmm. So I'm stoked to see, maybe Magoo should have been out the first week, honestly. The mistake, like leaving their bags, then they've been fine. It's not come up again. We haven't heard a thing about it since that first leg. And still in it, and it's like it never happened.
Yeah, I almost forgot. Even when I just talked all about them, I didn't say anything about the bags. And Grace and Joe are like the poster child team for this. We're twice now. Like this week, even though it was a non-elimination, they should have been last the way things were going. And then it wasn't even a thing. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say that because there was a third flight. So they should have been on that flight and in more danger. But then they'll have tasks where both of them will just come into one and just blow through it. So I look at them and I'm like, they're both a weak and a strong team. Like they can be really strong and then make a dumb mistake. But if they hang around, I don't think they're going to win. But that team could be here at the Final Four because they're good at certain things and they seem to do better when they're behind. So we'll see. I don't know. It's the top 2 this week. Actually, the top 3 this week, I think feel pretty safe. But the other 5, I mean, who knows who goes home next week? Or in 2 weeks, actually. The next episode.
In 2 weeks. Yes, the next episode, whatever that will be. And I also want to say props to Amazing Race Canada for scheduling the bye week while I am on vacation. Good for them.
Yeah, I have a very busy week next week too. I'm out of town multiple times, so that also is appreciated. Thank you. Good job.
Yeah, Masi Cho, Amazing Race Canada. Yeah, so I think I was completely shocked. We get to this puzzle, and we can talk a little bit about the puzzle. It's a puzzle. It looks like every puzzle that's been on every reality show ever. I thought the tie into the satellite dishes was cute, but the show knew that this was not the most interesting thing in the episode, and we got just as much of it as we needed. Namely, that one team drops a piece on the ground. It doesn't really slow them up that much. Louis and Marie figure out pretty quickly that they've missed a piece, and they pick it up. But then the only reason we even saw this puzzle at all, I will say, I think it's because it almost broke somebody. And I don't think the show was anticipating that this was going to be the thing that broke somebody. But, poor Lacey. It was just not their day to begin with. And I think having to do the task 4 times immediately prior to this was probably a contributing factor to this. But, this puzzle was a nothing burger. And it should have been, like, nobody should have taken a penalty on this. I have a lot of sympathy because it was probably cold. They were tired. They'd had every task that was not suited to their skill set. And this is the part that, like, it wasn't the puzzle. It was everything else leading up to the puzzle. But it was still, I was surprised to see that this was the thing.
Yeah, and it wasn't a case either where they were like, you've seen teams where they're hours behind and they're like, why are we even trying? No, they were still in it. Obviously they were near the back. But I think, I wonder how much watching her sister have to eat all that food and struggle also played a role. Because she didn't, I'm not saying that was the reason, but I think that also played a role where right when they start the leg, she feels really bad. Again, I don't want to put thoughts, it seemed like from what she said that she felt really bad for having to watch Celia eat all that food, and she was struggling. And it seemed like more than some of the others. So that starts the leg. And then, you have the dog sleds and everything else because they did okay on the language, but I don't know. And she said the last few days have been rough. So I don't know. I think it's just the pressure of being on the show. Part of it might be killer fatigue, but I think the pressure really hit her and she felt like she failed. And again, I'm not diagnosing. I'm just saying, like you said, it's easy to look at that and be like, what happened on the puzzle? But it, like I told you, I mean, sometimes it's like not being on the show or whatever. There's, like when you're having a tough day and there's one really minor thing and you're like, that is it, or that's just the last straw. I think this was kind of like that. It's just like,
I think
her brain couldn't deal.
Yeah. But in the conversation they had, like, I think that was interesting to me because it almost felt like they were ready to just quit the race. Like, that wasn't a taking a penalty moment. That was we are done with the entire race moment. And the way that they were talking to each other, you hear Celia say, are you done with all of this? You just need to tell me so that I know what's happening. Like that had a vibes of like, call the producers in and get us on the next plane out of here. And I think maybe we saw them kind of talk each other back from the ledge to at least finish out the leg and take the penalty and see what happens next. Which I think is smart gameplay. Like if you still want to be there, if it's less about like being completely done with the race and the concept of racing, it is like accepting that not being in the race anymore is your lot in life. It's a subtle distinction. I know, like it's the difference between I hate this and I don't want to be here, or I need immediately to be doing something different, even though that means I can't be here anymore. And I think they were leaning more toward the latter at the point that they elected to take the penalty. And also, it's amazing Canada. Everybody takes penalties all the time. That's just the thing you can do here. So it is always an option. And the conversation with Grace and Joe on the plane, I thought was really interesting as well. Where they said, hey, you guys have nothing to worry about. You're safe because we have this penalty. And it was, I think, Amazing Race US, you never see that conversation happen.
No, US would try to make it like somehow it'd be really, they'd present it like, well, you never know. Someone might get lost or whatever. Yeah, and I wonder too if just like this was kind of a weirdly structured leg where it seemed like it was done. And then they went to the second Fuse. Fuse gets two mentions. The second Fuse sign-up board with like 6 minutes left in the episode or something crazy. I mean, without commercials like that. And you had 3 flights. And so again, what happened is they technically were on. So that was, and the flights don't leave until teams left. Of course, they didn't know this. But you could easily go, oh, well, if they had just spent 10 hours on the puzzle, that plane would just have to stay there. But I mean, obviously there's light and everything else. But I think having Grace and Joe on the plane may have helped too, because they got to do this kind of fun task with no pressure because they knew they were last. They just get to do the thing where you flip your leg up in the air and you jump and you slide, kind of like a fun thing, you know. I don't mean to gloss over the Northern Games here, Jess, but I'm just saying.
Oh, I have a lot of thoughts on the Northern Games.
They got to do that. And so then by the time they get to the Mex, we've seen some where teams are done. They want out of there. You know, you can go back to Zach and Flo. You can go back to Nick and Vicky, whomever. There's plenty of examples where teams are just like, get me out of here. Adam
Rex
from
and Bob.
season 6. yeah, all these teams that are just done. I mentioned all these U.S. teams, but yeah, there's been examples of the Amazing Race Canada too. And then they tell it's on elation, the people are just like, all right, I guess we'll race more. This was not that way at all. They seemed really happy, but I guess we should talk about the Northern Games before we get to the fun Matt moment.
Yeah, well, I think I agree with you, Dan, that it was out of nowhere. I think I was as surprised as the racers when they get to the point where they are at a logical stopping point, and then it's like, get on a plane and go somewhere else. Wait, what? This is the end of the episode. You're supposed to go to the pit stop. Why are you getting on a plane to go to the pit stop? That was a little bit wild to me as well. But daylight's not a problem right now, Dan, because this was filmed, I think, in May.
And that makes sense.
Yeah, they're in the far, far north. Daylight's not a problem right now. We'll just suffice it to say there's nothing but daylight. You know, if they're out till 3 a.m., they might lose a little bit of light, but they're fine. I wouldn't worry about that. Yeah, let's go. Let's get on the plane and go to Tuktoyaktuk, and we're gonna do Northern Games, which this, I think, I can see where this is the kind of thing you'd start doing if you had to spend a whole lot of time indoors in cold weather. This just smacks of like, I am alone in the house and I have nothing to do. I'm going to invent a game where I have to balance on one foot and then kick up into the air.
It reminds me of actually when I was a kid in the 80s where there was no intranet and screens and stuff. I mean, we had TV, but you know what I mean? It was very different. Where you in the summer, you'd just be like, oh, let's see if I can jump over that bar, and then you'd fall down, or let's see if I can lift, but that kind of stuff. It's like those types, yeah, like you said, it's like, well, what if I kick my leg up and then this ball is here, or what? You know, I couldn't do it. Don't get me wrong.
It's like I'm gonna bounce the ball off of that wall, and it's gonna hit the pole, and then it's gonna go in the hoop. It's a lot like, yeah, I don't think I could do any of these. I didn't try them.
Me neither.
Yeah, I'm not out here doing a Will and James trying to kneel jump in my own living room. But I thought this was a very real thing. Northern games are a real thing, but it was very funny to me that this is something that people work on and practice and get good at. And also that it involved a data and assist. Going to the team that needs it the least. Yeah.
I guess maybe
like,
they were
feel
first, maybe they were second. I don't know, but
ironically, they get the assist and they don't come in first this leg. But also that it wasn't just that the assist enabled you to only get 2 out of the 3. The assist said you could have one of the athletes do the task for you, which kind of opens it up to like, this may not be an assist at all. Like, what if your athlete screws it up?
That's funny. Yeah. That's kind of like, well, this is like Survivor South Africa when they brought in these like professional football, soccer here players, and they were really bad at the task and they kept losing challenges with the professionals. It's like very old Survivor South Africa. It's like that. But no, this isn't even really an assist. This is the same way where that guy packed the sled for you. It's assist implies like, I'll do this part, you do this. No, this is just like you tagged in. They just tagged the guy in and he took over, basically.
Yeah. And like he was the guy demonstrating tasks, so you would hope he would know how to do it.
He was pretty good. I don't think that impacted them finishing second at all. I think Evie and Blake were just very good.
Yeah, they would have finished second regardless. I don't think they necessarily would have gotten it done faster if they hadn't got the assist, but that's funny what if to think about. Yeah, and so then we get finally the streak is broken, and Evie and Blake take first place. They get a trip to Amsterdam and Grand. And this, I think at the point where you're all getting on a plane at the end of the leg, you got to know it's going to be a non-elimination, because otherwise I think there's just too much going on at that point to say that you're going to have one team fall far behind, and you're not going to tack that on to the end if you're just going to eliminate somebody as soon as they get off the plane. Like, it's not really even sporting.
Yeah, they don't really do that anymore. This feels like, I mean, they years ago we had those in US where it'd be like this happened in like season 6 where they had a bunching right before like the final task. But it's very rare. And I don't know why I keep mentioning season 6 of the US, but it's that good of a season. But yeah, so I actually thought it might be Keep On Racing. When they went to get on the plane, I thought there might be a to be continued or something, and this was going to be some epic Arctic leg, but it's not. They're moving somewhere else afterwards. But like we talked about last week, this does seem like when you have a spectacular location, we're at the 4th episode, this feels like the right time to have a non-elimination. And then the show, tried so hard to convince us that they were eliminating Lacey and Celia, and I was like, oh no. Amazing Race Canada, when you try to make it, we don't know who's going to be last. I mean, this you couldn't do that. But I'm just saying,
yeah,
they got the whole exit and everything. And I should also mention some other strong performances. I haven't mentioned them much, but Ika and Dimitri were third. They were on the first plane. They were super strong and just finished third like they're doing. And then, the other teams we've talked about, most of them already. But should we, Jess, are you ready? Are you ready to answer this important question, courtesy of John Montgomery? Can I ask you this question?
Please, Dan.
I like to call him Contemplative John when he's like this. He did this last year too. I let off with that. I save it for the end this time for the people that listen to this entire podcast. But Jess, are we sometimes hard on ourselves because of our lofty expectations in life?
I like the we in this. It's like everybody has to contemplate this for themselves. It's not, do you think you're sometimes hard on yourself? It's like all of us, really. This is a human experience. This is the human condition we're all talking about here. It's philosophical John he's trying things out. God love him. He's trying things out.
I just think, I mean, he has a certain facial expression that he uses when he's going to try and say something deep. You can tell he's memorized it. He stumbles a bit on lofty there. Like when he says it, he's like, I'm like, is he crying? It's like, no, I think he just took a moment, but he's just really like wants to make this deeper instead of just being like, so this is the end of the line, but it's not. He tried to make it a little deeper this time, which I appreciated. But and I don't think that question did it, but they seemed really happy to still be on the race. So I appreciated that too.
And I think he's calibrating it to the situation, because with some teams, they get to the end and he knows he can kind of mess with them a little bit. I don't think anybody wanted to mess with Lacey and Celia at this point. It was not be a good look to mess with them after the day they'd had, and that they almost quitting task. I think with some teams you could be like, well, what have you learned about each other? Like, you must be really disappointed to have to go out like this. Like, what a way. But it turns out you're not going out. He can drag it out with them. He's not going to drag it out. So he's got to go like school counselor John at them. I don't even know what it was. So many different Johns.
Philosophical John, contemplative John. I like school counselor John though. Not the kindergarten at the Desjardins commercial.
Though. No. Not
That's weird.
Visiting
John.
a random kindergarten. No.
Yeah, no. The kid's going to medical school. Woo! But thanks to the assist from Desjardins, apparently. Yeah, no, I like it though. I make fun a little bit, but I like when John's trying stuff like that, because we've seen the same old fake out 100 million times. Like Phil's using the same material. John's trying something different. I like it.
Yeah, he's really, I think over the past dozen years, he's really made this his own. And it makes the Canada experience a very different experience. There's so many things that are different about Amazing Race Canada. The small towns, the Chamber of Commerce vibes, the sponsored tasks on every single leg. And then you have John, who's figuring out, like, what can I do that's going to set me apart from all these other people that have hosted the show? And he's brought his own personality to it. And where I felt like it was very strange in the first couple of seasons of Amazing Race Canada to have him there, like his semi goofball, his very flat prairie accent. And now it's like he knows what his role is, and he's willing to try things, but he's always John. Like, the Johnness of it is not a question anymore. He's not just like some random goober who isn't Phil, right?
Yeah, it's not not that actor that was in Amazing Race Australia who didn't really want to be there early.
Grant Bowler.
Yes. This seems each season to be less excited to be there as we went along. But so yeah, should we get to some of the other questions that aren't from John? I don't know.
Yeah. For a second there, I thought John I go in the question document, and I'm like, is John asking us questions? Like, John doesn't know we have this. I interviewed him a decade ago one time. We should get him back on here. I would be very interested to talk to John. I'm going to make that happen. All right, so let's ask some questions here. I want to go to the question that I actually did research, Dan. I didn't just like come in by the seat of my pants like I usually do. I saw this question and I looked it up. So I want to start with this one from Melissa Mack on Facebook. John said this was the northernmost pit stop in Amazing Race Canada history. Do you know if any other iterations have gone further north? I checked, and Tuk Tuk is at a latitude of 69.4 degrees north. And so I am a geography nerd. I had to look this up. This does indeed appear to be the northernmost pit stop in global Amazing Race history. In Amazing Race 23, in the US version, they went to a town in Norway that was 68 degrees north. And then also in 17, they went to Narvik, Norway, and Kiruna, Sweden, which are both at 68 degrees north. Like, way up there. Like, I knew that the US race had been somewhere so far north in Norway that they had 24 hours of daylight, but they were 1 degree short, sadly, of the new record. And there's places they could still go. There's cool places to be up in that part of the world that we could certainly see that record beaten some. But I do enjoy a little bit of latitude geography here, and I'm the only person that finds this interesting. But I'm glad Melissa gave me a chance to look that up. It was a fun rabbit hole.
That's cool, though. I mean, I think maybe also that had to do with the flight, where that was like the best way to get to where the pit stop was that far north, you know? So even though for the leg, it was like, what are they doing? You know, Fuse doesn't need to be advertised twice, but I think with it being that, and it's cool to have them to see that. I mean, with how many seasons globally of not just US, but Canada, US, all the others that no one has gone further north, I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's super cool. And not for nothing, this time last year, I was actually around that latitude. I wasn't that far north. I did get right inside the Arctic Circle, in the West Fjords of Iceland. So I did look into, they don't go anywhere. They don't go to interesting parts of Iceland in Amazing Races. They don't get that far north. They pretty much stick to the South Coast.
Yeah, no, I haven't been that far north. I think the furthest probably was Alaska and Anchorage, but even when I've been in Canada, it's been like Vancouver and stuff. So not nearly this far north, you know, very different. It's almost like, well, it's obviously very different, and they're going to be back in British Columbia next week. But let me see, what other questions should we ask? We've covered a lot of these already. Some were about Lacey and Celia taking the penalty. And then others about how much was left of the puzzle. Let me see here. I'm going through it. Well, you know, speaking of John, though, Eric did on Blue Sky did say that they missed the opportunity to have John actually swim in the Arctic Ocean. Another example of John taking it too easy, Jess.
Yeah, you should have polar bear plunged that stuff.
Again, I looked down and saw John's question. I wanted to ask you the question again, but no.
Well, you could ask me that question again. It's a great question.
Lost Reader 23. One thing I thought it was good to highlight again is saying on Blue Sky, one about the Neil jump would have been the end of Lost Reader 23 on the race and for the rest of the life, but also. I have to keep saying the name, but I'm not sure. Lost Reader 23 loves the Indigenous focus of the race. And I think I just felt like, you know, also likes what we do on the podcast. But more importantly, thank you for that, by the way. The Indigenous focus, I think it's great. And I think they've done I feel like this is something even with the casting and with episodes like this one, that they have done better in the second half of seasons. Like in the last four seasons or so, I feel like has improved, Jess.
Yeah, it has gotten a lot better. And I think Canada's strength has always been in highlighting what a mosaic it is of cultures and of experiences. Like there's always a team of people that have immigrated, that were born in some other country, that have become Canadian citizens, which I've loved. But the First Nations focus, especially in the recent season, has been great. And I think this week, like the mention of at least four different Indigenous languages was a lot of fun. And I liked that a lot. I liked that they're highlighting how deep the history goes in the culture and even the problematic aspect of it, really not flinching at any of it. And this was a really fun leg in that respect. I think that kind of, we tackled most of these. I think there's an interesting thought exercise from Brandon on Facebook. He says, imagine if the U-turn vote was this week instead of last week. That would have been interesting, but also these two tasks were pretty evenly matched. I don't think any one of them was like, forcing a team to do it wouldn't have been terrible.
That's what I was thinking too.
Yeah. Not the last week's were, but there was no like particular thing. Like if you were really bad at this one thing, it would sink you.
Yeah, or even like if they had to do the eating as a detour or something like that, but these two, I felt like they took longer than last week. I mean, probably not hard to take longer than the Antique Mall one, but probably still in the like, oh, last week each one was 15 minutes. I'm just throwing out of time. And this week they're 25 or whatever, something like that. I don't think it was like this week everything would have been 2 hours. So the teams probably still survive, especially in this hypothetical scenario if Jesse and Jonathan still have the express pass. But again, you got to throw everything else. Does the cab thing still happen? Like, is the leg the same? I mean, there's so many other questions.
Like, does this butterfly affect all of it to the point where Lindsay and Celia don't quit? Because if the U-turn vote was this week instead of last week, and they still quit, none of it matters. And also, you don't want to U-turn vote in a leg where nobody gets eliminated.
Yeah, I hate that when they do the U-turn and there's all this drama and then it's not elimination. Like last week when they had the U-turn and the face-off, I'm like, they got to eliminate somebody. They can't have an elimination after all this. Teams, they've done it on shows before, but this week it made a lot more sense, I think.
Yeah, it certainly did. I think that brings us to the end of this week's episode. I think we can put it all on ice for a week, and then we'll come back fresh in British Columbia in 2 weeks. Dan, what else is going on with you? Anything cool?
Oh, not really. I mean, I'm just enjoying the fact that it's not, the heat index is not over 110 today. So hooray, Yay. Let's keep that going for a little bit. It fit perfectly with watching this, but no, just kind of enjoying the summer's flying by. We're rolling into August and just having a good time doing this and just hanging out. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, hard same. Canada's number one summertime adventure is also our number one summertime adventure. Although a close second is the button maker that my kid and I got. We made like 100 pinback buttons today, just of anything we thought, anything that popped into our heads. Like it's just like coming up with random cartoon references. I'm like, yep, I will print that out and put it on a button. And now we have this giant bowl of buttons to choose from. It's very fun. So highly recommend that if you are bored. Yeah, I have nothing else going on right now. I'm just chilling, doing Canada stuff and hanging out with you, Dan. It's always a pleasure. And of course, we want to thank everybody who writes in every week. If you have thoughts or questions or anything you want to share about Amazing Race Canada, you can always hit us up on the socials. We're mostly spending time over at Blue Sky right now. You can find me at Jess Liese. You can find Dan at the Dan Heaton. I'm also on Insta. You can find me there at Haymaker Hattie. And of course, you can join us Facebook group if you go to robswebsite.com/TARgroup, or you go to Facebook and search Amazing Race on RHAP. Make sure when you apply to join the group, make sure you answer the questions, because if you don't answer the questions, I'm just going to reject your application, because I enjoy the little bit of power that gives me to reject people. But if you do answer the questions and you're in good faith and you want to come and spread the Amazing Race love with the rest of us, we're happy to have you. And we are almost 1,000 strong in this group, mostly US Amazing Race fans, but we have a lively Amazing Race Canada discussion happening every week. So I think with all that, I want to thank Dan again for joining me on this awesome summertime adventure. I'm going to say summertime adventure a billion times until the words just stop having any meaning whatsoever, apparently. But thanks to Dan, thanks to the listeners, thanks to everybody behind the scenes, and we will see you all in 2 weeks.
This is RHAP. We know reality TV.